they're going to take great pleasure in, from their respective positions as very experienced mediators. Just to kick off, I was going to ask you, because you have a particular take on the role of the mediator. You were saying now architecture in the 21st century is very much lacking the kind of mediators that it needs to achieve its cultural tasks. So just quickly, how do you view the value of Peter and Michael's roles, so you know them very well?
Well, in a world where money is the essential value, London is lucky to have Peter Rees as a counterforce to a world of opportunities that he has to serve at the same time. You know, creating the city of London has been an imposition, but also a negotiation, and a very strong one. Mm-hmm. And then Westminster also has a very strong team of people, two people. I know Peter because I was a youngster when I was doing Broadgate Exchange House, and he was like younger. I was really ridiculously young, but you were younger, and very impressive. And he was like, I know that Peter was feared by architects. Mm-hmm. And then veneered when he was like liking and supporting, and the work that is done in a city is exceptional. And to me, the space between buildings, bringing a building from the 14th century to the 20th century and the 21st century in synergy and happiness of dialogue makes people happy. And we only work in a city, but man, this is about diversity. Yeah. And that echoes a success. Okay. And I think it's very attractive because of the work of Peter.
And then with Michael, who's working on the
Michael
project at King's Cross.
Yeah.
Now, certain people feel that architects and artists really don't work very well together, but Michael has managed to overcome this in his work as a mediator.
Because Michael has a very conceptual approach to art that also turns into a unique solution that is obviously operating with a mediation that is from a place, but doesn't need necessarily to be, polite, but brings a question. And I think this is where architects cannot go. And that's the relay that I think, I would like to think that Michael doesn't come when everything is done. It could be done during when the masses are done, so we can sculpt the void as well. Right? So sculpting the city, because that's a public realm, that the streets. And Peter, heard him, walked with him in the city. It talks about living rooms and in continuous living rooms, and I think it takes a lot of strength and intelligence to.
Yeah. So Peter, what do you make of the urban room and the black box? Are they? Do you have your own concepts at the City of London that you use to guide you, golden sections or whatever?
I think the approach I would take is much more using one's own sensitivity and prejudices rather than trying to analyse how I do it. I mean, after studying architecture, my first job was working as Gordon Cullen's assistant. And I remember Gordon produced the book Townscape and produced some marvellous concepts. But the point at which Gordon got into trouble was when he tried to explain how he did it. He just couldn't. Neither could Kevin Lynch. I think this is perhaps the difference between the British mind and the Parisian mind, and I'm glad you made the difference between the Parisian and the French mind. I listen to Erik Satie's music and love it, but if you listen to or read Satie's explanation of his music, it doesn't make any sense. So, I watch your pictures. I feel your sensitivity through your pictures. When I get inside your black box, I have to admit I'm a little lost. But the point at which we come together, as you've already said, is the importance of spaces. To me, it's the spaces that make a place, not the buildings. It's very good to have fine architecture, just as it's nice to have good possessions in your home. But if the rooms and the spaces aren't good, then they won't animate you. You won't feel like you won't enjoy life. And so, in the City of London, it's wonderful to have the collection of spaces we already have that have grown organically throughout hundreds of years. But it's wonderful when you get architects and they're clients who are prepared to work with those and appreciate it and create new ones to extend the network.
Mm-hmm. So, Michael, what can curating do that planning can't?
I mean, does this work? Art's role in this mix is to create alternative narratives that are not involved with things, and you brought this up, the idea of public space being a place of transportation, or a moment that you move between objects that you buy. There's other narratives that can be brought out which then question the way you behave in public space. So if you're presented with something in public space that doesn't ask you to purchase something or facilitates you moving through that space, then you actually have to start thinking about what that space is and what it's doing. And that moment becomes very interesting. There's a Swedish artist called Ake who did a rather beautiful series of pieces called City Swings, where he just hung swings from the bottom of bridges and off lampposts and things like that. And people could just go and use them or not use them. It's something that's very difficult to curate, because the minute you do that, then I have to talk to Peter Rees, and he goes, well, that would set a precedent, and then we'd have to hang swings off every lamppost, and that would become very problematic. But, you know, that is what art can do in this mix that I think is very valuable, is it says there are other possibilities there in public space.
And actually, artists have got quite deeply involved in public consultation processes now. They have been curated. They are becoming much more fun. But is that still, in some way, still paying lip service to what people really want?
What people really want.
Well, that's.
I mean, everyone wants different things,
a profound concept.
We were just chatting before. I mean, one thing that I always want in a city is the ability to be lost. I like being lost in cities, but a lot of other people might actually hate that sensation.
We're trying to get away from that mentality of build it and they build them and they will come. You know, that sort of ivory tower mentality of developer, because it's already been shown to be. You know, there are a lot of failures that come when you actually evolve things without finding out what people want. Well, we had all of that with the millennium, didn't we? With all those cultural centres that didn't turn out to actually be have a sort of a vision behind them.
I mean, as I say, you know, different people interrogate their spaces in different ways, the spaces that they work in different ways, and. The more different types of interrogations we have, the more we can illuminate the needs that are in that space. But I think that's kind of slightly different from using artists as mediators and consultants to draw what people want from a space, because the whole thing about creating new spaces is that the history of that space starts the moment that space appears. And people will reflect on that in the future, so it's difficult to anticipate.
How do you actually mediate between fixed and flexible outcomes? Because I think Peter, in one of your lectures, you said you love high quality open spaces, but you also love the crossover spaces, and you acknowledge the reality that in the city, the business has long since been conducted in bars and pubs and coffee bars. It's a place where ideas are bounced off people.
Yes, I mean, I think the thing that has kept me in the city so long is not the ability to play a part in the creation of wonderful things through great architects and artists who come to work in the city. It's to do with maintaining the best of what has already been created. And I don't mean in terms of, quotes, heritage. I mean in terms of activity, vitality. I see it as planning as more akin to gardening than anything else. Because if you move into a new house, the traditional architectural approach to the garden would be, well, let's clear it and start again. Let's clear all the plants and put down some decking.
Do you think so?
Traditionally,
that's tabula rasa,
Indeed. But the creative way is to move in and look at the garden and see what the existing plants are doing, look at the ones that are successful and encourage them and create some space around them so they can thrive even more, weed out a few of the ones that don't look as if they're doing very well and try some new species to see which ones work. But you work with it, not against it. And in the city, as you say, the banks came out of the pubs, the insurance companies came out of the coffee houses. The little alleyways are still wonderful places for bumping into people you don't expect to meet. The pubs are wonderful places for eavesdropping on gossip, out of which you can make millions of pounds after lunch. The French don't have that. The French have cafes where you sit at tables and you only hear your own friends gossip. Well, who wants to hear your friends gossip? You know that anyway. What you want is the gossip from the next table, and you can never get close enough to hear what they're talking about. Whereas in the British pub, a couple of pints, you sidle up to the next group, you eavesdrop, rush back to the office, 3 million quid. So, you know, the thing is to work with the existing gossip channels.
Yeah.
It's gossip is the thing that makes the city successful.
Yeah.
And good developments in the city will reinforce those gossip channels and create more of them and latch onto them. It takes ages for a Canary Wharf or a Milton Keynes to become a place. You can't do it overnight. You cannot do it instantly, however good your black box is. But you can learn from the existing and extrapolate it. And to be fair, in your pictures, that's what you're seen to be doing.
Yeah. But, okay, can I?
Yeah, please.
Because I mean, it's okay. My black box is black, okay, it's fine. But it's supposed to be helping you to see better in a design process. And you're always involved in a design process. But how come it's always on the fait accompli when everything is kind of done and you are influencing basically this and that, but not proposing necessarily, and you cannot direct as a city officer, right? You can only say, oh, you have to be careful with this thing. But you cannot say, client, why don't you go and get Michael Pinsky to shape that space because you cannot. Why can't we have that shared vision other than just a respected confrontation? That you're successful because you got the architects and the developers to respect you immensely because you can just not veto but badly recommend to the councillors, and then that's it. And then they lose, and they're afraid to lose money. But why is it not possible to have a multiple to start before the object is there, before the project is there?
Well, yes, I think you should. And I've always said to developers, I'd like you to come to see us at the back of the envelope stage, but please don't draw on the envelope first. Come to us for a planning brief. Get us involved in the process, because if you have the architect representing the solution, if you like, the client representing the need, the public, it's very difficult to bring the public to the meeting. So you need somebody that can take the role of representing the place and the community in that mix. But all of those elements need to be in from the very start of the creative process, and I agree with you, that all needs to be in and mixed into the recipe right from the very start. Unfortunately, as you say, developers will want to try and pin down as many things as possible, and so very often I have to side with the architect to help them to take it all apart. So that they can have another go at it. You know, and very often it's reading the nudges and the winks of the architect in the room while he's presenting his client's scheme and realizing what help he needs in order to be able to reinterpret in the way he would like to.
But I heard you, in other circumstances where there was only developers present and financial people, to say that their numbers and the statistics was not making, what was not, they were comparing London, New York, and then you said that those values are not what makes the City of London successful. There's cultural values. There are things that can be shared, and there are things where you feel comfortable. So there's, of course, we know how attractive the British mentality is to the world for its tolerance and welcome of differences and so on. But isn't there also an opportunity to activate or to, I mean, I don't know if it's representation or if it can go further in a capacity to orchestrate a grander vision than just the one-to-one negotiation. Well, I think I would agree with your answer anyway. So I'm not sure how you can have a grand vision other than being a statesman or a churchman and all. Can we have a grand vision? Because
I think London is grand enough not to need a grand vision.
Yeah.
If Wren's plan had been built after the fire of London,
Yeah.
London would now be like Paris. And you'd have to build La Défense. Well, we did build La Défense, we built Canary Wharf. But it's in addition, it's not instead of. So I think London has survived most because there's never been a grand vision for London, and that makes it infinitely flexible.